The Hellenistic period really wasn't that bad for the Jews. After all, the infrastructure was built up using Greek architecture and Greek design. Education flourished, an emphasis on philosophy and wisdom. The Greeks were very known for the use of art.
What's the point of doing art?
And Alexander the Great was a good leader. He knew that Hellenism can be a way to unify the diverse population of his colonies, but he also knew what to stay away from, and that was the colonies' individual religions. The last thing he wanted to do was force Greek religion upon his colonies. That would, of course, lead to anarchy. That would lead to rebellion. How can I say that with such certainty? Because one of Alexander the Great's successors, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, has a change of heart. And he forces Hellenization, in other words, the theology, the Greek religion, upon his colonies. Reason why he did it? Greeks were losing battles. The Greeks were losing battles, and they felt the Greek gods were offended. So you have all these people in your Greek empire, but only a portion of them are actually showing devotion to Greek gods. The Greek gods are angry. So Antiochus IV says we can solve this problem by just making sure all the colonies are now worshiping the Greek gods. And this was also the case in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, Antiochus IV, according to legend, defiled the temple by putting Zeus inside this temple for Yahweh and sacrificing a pig in the Holy of Holies. Whoa, Zeus, false god, right? But a pig? A pig is not kosher. A pig is considered unclean, impure.
Pigs are filthy animals.
And he is in the Holy of Holies. Granted, the Ark of the Covenant is no longer there, because that disappeared at the destruction of the first temple. But this room is still sacred. It is still sacred. And in the Holy of Holies, Antiochus has a pig slaughtered. The blood is shed. Impurity. He made it illegal for the Jews to publicly read scripture, and he outlawed circumcision. Failure to follow these bans would result in immediate death. So quite a few Jews just gave in. They abandoned again their allegiance to Yahweh, but this was not the case with the Maccabee family. The story of Antiochus and the Maccabee revolt are found in the book of 1 and 2 Maccabees. Now obviously 1 Maccabees was written first, but 2 Maccabees was actually by a different author. And what does 2 Maccabees consist of? Actually just a retelling of 1 Maccabees. 2 Maccabees is a lot more exaggerated hero worship. If you're looking for a little bit more historical reliability, check out 1 Maccabees. 1 and 2 Maccabees are also both written in Greek during the Hellenistic period. As a result, much like Sirach, 1 and 2 Maccabees were both also rejected by Protestants and Jews in the Old Testament canon. They make up 2 of the 7 deuterocanonical books. So let's talk a little bit about Judas Maccabeus. Maccabeus is not his last name. Again, in biblical times, people didn't have last names. Scripture introduces him in chapter 3 as referring to him as Judas, who was called Maccabeus. Maccabeus is a Greek word for hammer.
Yeah, they call him the Hammer.
And the reason why he was called Judas the Hammer is because he essentially became a hunter, going after any Jew who apostatized under Antiochus IV. So in other words, any Jew who offered a public sacrifice to a Greek god, Maccabee would hunt them down and bash their skulls in with his hammer.
Smack it with a hammer.
That's an instrument of death in his hands. Because he considered, obviously, apostatizing as being the greatest sin against Yahweh. So Judas Maccabeus leads a revolt against the Greek forces and are successful. The Greeks are expelled from the land. And for the first time since before the Babylonian captivity, the Jews are once again politically independent.
Our Independence Day!
The dynasty that is led by the Maccabee descendants is referred to as the Hasmonean Dynasty. Early in the morning, they rose and offered sacrifice, as the law directs, on the new altar of burnt offering that they had built. At the very season and on the very day the Gentiles had profaned it, it was dedicated with songs and harps and lutes and cymbals. All the people fell on their faces and worshiped and blessed heaven, so they celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days and joyfully offered burnt offerings. They offered a sacrifice of well-being and a thanksgiving offering. They decorated the front of the temple with golden crowns and small shields. They restored the gates and the chambers for the priest, and fitted them with doors. There was very great joy among the people, and the disgrace brought by the Gentiles was removed. This festival of the cleansing and rededication of the temple becomes now an annual Jewish tradition known as Hanukkah. And that's all the book of 1 and even 2 Maccabees says about this rededication. Now I know you're probably wondering, wait a minute, if this is the first Hanukkah story, where's that story about like the candles on the menorah and how there was only enough oil to light the candle for 1 night, but it went on for 8 nights. Isn't there an Adam Sandler movie called that, 8 Crazy Nights? Where did that come from? Why isn't that talked about in 1 Maccabees or even 2 Maccabees? The truth of the matter, my friends, that story, that tradition is nowhere in the Bible. So where does it come from? It comes from Jewish oral tradition. And this oral tradition was eventually documented and assembled in a book called the Talmud in the 2nd century AD. We're talking after Jesus. The collection of oral tradition was eventually compiled and written down. It is there in the Talmud where they talk about what I just read to you from 1 Maccabees, but then additional notes such as the oil that burned for 8 nights. Judas Maccabeus was an ideal Jewish warrior. And why we can say that is because prior to battle, during battle, after battle, Judas always knew his place.
You need to know your place.
Judas knew his place under God. He demonstrated that by offering sacrifices to God before and after battle. Fun fact, Judas Maccabeus is the only person in Scripture who offers a sacrifice after battle for the souls of his dead soldiers. This book does not just give us the origin of Hanukkah, but it's also the first reference to Purgatory, which is a Catholic belief that says that our souls, if there's still sin on them, but they're not permanent sins, go to a place called Purgatory where they eventually get cleansed in order to go to heaven. Why is Judas Maccabeus offering sacrifice to dead soldiers? That's unheard of, unless Judas believes that their souls were in danger and that he can intervene for their souls. And this eventually leads to a long Catholic tradition of purgatory and offering intercessions and sacrifice for our dearly departed. You don't get purgatory in the Protestant churches because, as I just established to you earlier, 1 and 2 Maccabees is part of the deuterocanonical scriptures. It's not in the Protestant Bible. And Martin Luther says if it's not in the Bible, in their Bible, it ain't real. It's not worth believing in. Because we have these additional books, we also have additional beliefs. Purgatory is one of them. The Jews have the belief in Hanukkah because of the Talmud, not because of the book of Maccabees. Do you think that during this reign of Judas Maccabeus that the people thought that he perhaps was the Messiah? It's possible.
Very, very possible.
Because the long-anticipated Messiah was supposed to be a warrior king who was going to rid the land of foreign oppressors. Judas Maccabeus did that. He was also, as I just established, a faithful man. He knew his place under God. He was a good leader. So was he the Messiah? Would his contemporaries have believed he was the Messiah? Well, he's missing a major prerequisite. He is not a descendant of David. He is not a Jew.
I'm not Jewish. Nobody's perfect.
He was actually from the tribe of Levi. And there's no messianic prophecy that says that the Messiah was going to be a Levite.